Hello, good evening, everybody, and welcome to this evening's planning committee. I'd like to welcome even members, officers, members of the public who are joining us in person, as well as anybody who's choosing to watch tonight's meeting via YouTube or also on our recording. And also thank you very much to the applicant and parish council participants for their presence this evening as well. I'd also like to welcome Sonia Sharp, who is our new locum senior planning solicitor and sitting to my left-hand side this evening for the meeting. Sonia's here to provide the committee with legal advice should any matters that we need support on arise during the course of this evening's proceedings. And before I start the meeting, I'd like to invite the committee member and scrutiny officer, Susan Ledane, to explain how proceedings will work and to undertake a roll call of those who are attending remotely.
Good evening. If a member wishes to speak, they should use the speak button located on the microphone unit. The microphone will light up green and the chair will be alerted of your request to speak. When the chair invites you to speak, your microphone will be made live and will turn red, at which point you can speak. When the public participants are invited to speak, their microphones will be made live by the committee officer. When requested to vote, voting will be via the yes, no, abstain buttons on your microphone unit. Details of how members voted will be shown on the screens around the room and the result will be visible on the YouTube stream. In the event of a tied vote, the chair will have the casting vote. Are there any questions before we start the meeting? I will now hand back to the chair.
Lovely. Thank you very much, Susan. All right, so item number 1, I have apologies for absence. I've received apologies from Councillor Brown, Councillor Amy Allen, Councillor Ian Mantle and Councillor Sadie Billing. Having given due notice, Councillor John Claydon will be substituting for Councillor Brown, Councillor Val Bryant will be substituting for Councillor Allen and Councillor McDebenham will be substituting for Councillor Mantle. Are there any further apologies? No, there aren't, because I can see everybody is present and correct. Thank you very much, colleagues. Notice of other business, I have received none. Chair's announcements. Recording. In accordance with council policy, this meeting is being recorded and the recording will be available both on the council's YouTube channel as well as on the council's ModGov site alongside the documents from this evening's meeting. 2, declarations of interest. Members are reminded to make declarations of interest before an item, and a detailed reminder about this and speaking rights is set out under the chair's announcements on the agenda. Number 3, to clarify matter for registered speakers, members of the public in groups of supporters or objectors. We don't have any objectors this evening, so it's just those of you who are supporting this application. Will each have will have up to 3 minutes per person. Where there is only one public supporter or objector, then that member of the public will have up to 5 minutes. I believe you've made appropriate arrangements, and what I will do, as always, is allow you to speak freely. I'll give you a 60-second warning when we're coming down towards the end of time. There is also a clock that will be displayed in the bottom corner of the screen. But what I will do is, if you're in the middle of flow, I am not going to cut across you and interrupt, because I know how off-putting that can be. If I need to give you a time reminder, I'll wait for you to take a pause or a comma. Okay. There are no member advocates present this evening, so I'm not going to read the time limits that member advocates receive. Also, and as I said, I will give you a warning at an appropriate time when we're running down the clock. At the end of your allotted time, you will be advised that your time has ended and you must cease. Again, I will chair fairly. I'm not going to stop you in the middle of a sentence and say you must stop now, because I don't think that that's very helpful to anybody. But if you are running on for an unreasonable period of time after the clock has stopped, then I will interject. Okay. And this is for members' attention. Section 4.8.23a of the Constitution. For purposes of clarification, in order to vote on an agenda item at this meeting, a member must be present for the entirety of the debate and consideration for that item. If a member leaves the room at any point of the item, they will not be allowed to vote. As always, colleagues, should we need a comfort break if matters are taking some time this evening, please indicate, and I will do my best to facilitate things for you. Equally, I'll keep an eye on time as well, and if it looks like it's an appropriate time and the agenda allows, I'll call a natural break where it makes sense for us based on the business. Okay, so item number 4, public participation. This evening we have representations from Parish Councillor Margaret Trinder, Tom Allington, who is the applicant's representative, I believe, John Buck, who is the applicant's agent, and Russell Prince, who is the applicant. I think you're all present and correct. Is anybody not here whose name I have read out? Oh, good. That's very helpful. Excellent. So I will move us swiftly onwards to the first substantive matter of business, which is agenda item number 5, colleagues, and that is planning application 24/01604/FP. Temple Dinsley, formerly the Princess Helena College, School Lane, Preston, Hertfordshire, SG4 7RT. I'm going to pass over to Peter Ball to present both the full permission application and also the presentation on the listed building consent application, which is the second substantive item of business this evening, because it makes sense, colleagues, I think, for us to hear both parts of those together. But the first item that we are going to be considering is that full permission. So any comments that you do have about the listed building consent item, I would suggest saving until the end. Right. So without further ado, I shall hand over to Peter to take us through the slides.
Thank you, Chair. So for clarity, it's useful that we just explain that the full application deals with the demolition works, all the new build elements, external alterations to the existing structures listed and unlisted, landscaping and other technical matters. The listed building application, which will follow the consideration of this full planning application, is concerned only with the physical alterations, internal and external, to the listed buildings and structures. An addendum was circulated this morning to members, updating various matters. There's some minor text corrections to the original published report. Sport England have confirmed also their withdrawal of their objection and recommend conditions and clauses in the section 106 for the delivery of the community sports facilities. Hertfordshire County Council Highways Unit have also withdrawn their objection and now recommend a range of highway conditions. These are set out in the addendum. Developer has agreed in principle to these additional conditions and clauses. There are some duplicated conditions, and part of the recommendation, as already set out, we've asked members to provide delegated powers to officers to resolve and amend these to secure the necessary technical details and deliver the whole development. In relation to the presentation, members will appreciate from the report that this is an unusually complex site. There are therefore an unusual amount of slides. I believe this morning a slide reference sheet has been circulated by email to members to aid questions and answers following the presentation. So there is only one presentation for both applications. Might I suggest, Chair, that it might be useful, we've got 8 sections as part of the presentation that you might want to consider. We stop and take sort of questions and queries at the end of each section. It might just be easier.
I think that makes sense, Peter. I think that would probably assist colleagues. And in the event that you're asked a question on a particular section that you know the answer is likely to come up in the next slide set of the slide deck, obviously, I think for efficiency, the best thing to do would be to let members know, hold the question, and then on the relevant slide kind of address and answer the concern that arises in that space, just so that we've got access to information and the right images up on the screen as well.
Thank you. So we turn to the slides, please. Next slide, please. So we have the location plan here. This is the site, which is outlined in red, immediately to the east of the settlement boundary for Preston Village. It's 5 kilometres south of Hitchin, bounded to the east and the south are public highways, the School Lane to the west and to the south, St Albans Highway. To the north and west of the site boundaries are agricultural land. And to the north of the site is a development known as the Dower House. This is 6 residential units. Next slide, please. Thank you. So this is the existing site plan. So I picked out some notable features here, which are the main building, which you can see is number 1. The existing sports hall, which is annotated 4, that's to the north of the main building. There's the 2 existing vehicular access points at 11 and 14. A copy of this plan was circulated this morning as part of the report addendum. Next slide, please. So we have the first aerial photograph, which looks from the north, from the Hitchin direction. And you can see in the foreground, that's the sports hall, the main, obviously, building block, a little bit further north. And then the original pond, last used as a swimming pool, it's the blue rectangular shaped object. And that looping access drive is the main access into the site. Next slide, please. This is the front elevation of the main building. You can see the car park there, which is going to be restored. And the formal gardens you get sight of, and the swimming pool there to the left and to the rear of the main building. Next slide, please. And this is the view looking from the main village. Again, same features you can see. To the left there is the sports hall, the main building, swimming pool, pond, and the formal gardens there in the foreground. Next slide, please. This is the landscape context plan, which shows the key constraints relating to the application site. So the application site is edged in red. The registered park and gardens is hatched in orange. The Preston Conservation Area is hatched in purple. And the listed buildings are shown with green and blue circles. Next slide. So this is showing the original kind of phasing plan of the main building. These 2 plans illustrate how the site has evolved. So we have the original 18th century building and the coach house in orange, and the more recent buildings, which is essentially last 120 years, shaded in blue and purple. Next slide, please. So get an appreciation of the actual building. These photos illustrate the main elevation. That's the top photograph of the main building, and the west elevation of the building, and some of the architectural detailing that's prevalent across that building also. Next slide, please. This is a picture of what's known as the Belvedere. It's a detached curtilage listed structure to the rear north garden area. And this is to be refurbished. Next slide, please. So we have to the top, you see the main listed entrance and gates, the boundary wall to the western boundary is listed. These will be repaired. Next slide, please. This is one of the individually listed structures. It's known as the Ice House. It's located adjacent to the proposed east car park. So you can appreciate from the photos, the trees have affected the structural integrity of this, and it's to be preserved in situ with a grille installed to prevent entry for safety and ecological reasons. Next slide, please. This is a structure known as the Piggery. It's a listed building located south of the proposed east car park, and the proposal here is to repair it like for like. Next slide, please. This is the demolitions plan, which shows structures and buildings that will be removed as part of the proposals. Next slide, please. So here we have the proposed site plan. A copy of this was circulated as part of the original report. Again, just pointing out the noticeable areas and buildings, which include the main building at point 1, the formal historic gardens to the west of the main building and to the north, the sports hall housing at 44, proposed east car park at 43, the tank house at 10, pump house at 11, summer house and Harwood house at 8 and 9 respectively, and the community sports facilities at 22 and 29. Next slide, please. As part of the proposals, a number of footpaths, both public and permissive, will be delivered and secured. This drawing illustrates both existing and proposed footpaths. So within the site, we have the blue dotted permissive path for residents of the Dower House. That's 6 units to the exit into the village. The red dotted new private path for residents of the development to the village. The orange is an existing permissive path with new permissive paths dotted in purple, again linking the village to the proposed community facilities and the existing public footpath network to the south of the site. And outside of the site, there's 2 new public footpaths in brown and the associated crossings on the western side of the school lane, adjacent to the main entrance, and on the Hitching Road, north of the green, which will improve pedestrian connectivity between the site and the village, and specifically the existing bus stops serving the village. So that's the end of the first part of the presentation, Chair.
Thank you very much. So when I call for questions, just for clarity, I'm asking for questions that come from members of the planning committee. Unfortunately, I can't take questions from members of the public. So if you could please be respectful and mindful of committee business, that would be absolutely wonderful. So colleagues, any questions on the first set of slides and the first part of this presentation from Peter? Yes, Councillor Tyson.
Thank you, Peter, for that, and everyone who's put in so much hard work into this project. I just wanted to look at this slide again with regard to the what appeared to be the somewhat contentious issue of the paved footpaths, which were proposed by the highways. Could you just indicate on the map, if it's possible, to see where those are, and maybe perhaps the parish council, if they're here, I
Is it right to
quite catch it who was here.
go to the screen, Chair? Is that just easier to the point? It's the proposed school lane footpath here. This is an existing footpath, as are the other yellow ones, and then we have a new section of footpath here. This is the bus stop, existing bus shelter.
Does that assist, Councillor Tyson?
Yeah, it does indeed. Yes, I'm not quite sure in my own mind yet how far the debate on that has progressed, but maybe we'll come back to that. Yeah. Okay.
I think we're coming back into that in further sections. Are there any further questions on this part of the presentation? The next section, just to be clear as well, colleagues, the next sections we've got are main building, sports hall, pump and tank houses, summer house plantation housing, east car park, park gardens and grounds, and community sports facilities. Just in case you've not got the slide references and the sections broken down in front of you. Right, I think we can continue, Peter.
Thank you, Chair. So next slide, please. So this is the main building, some historic photographs which illustrate the Edwin Luton's period. So that's early 1900s, when a number of extensions were added and the formal gardens created. This is the main building elevation plans, gives an appreciation of the scale of the main building, illustrates the phasing periods of the original structures being underlined in orange and the more recent one periods in purple and blue. This is the main building again. First floor layout plan proposed, which illustrates how the building will be divided to create the individual residential units. The interventions in the original building have been minimized where new elements are included, such as lifts. These are located in the more recently constructed and less sensitive parts of the main building. Next slide, please. The photos are showing some of the architectural detail within the main building, including the wooden floors, panelled walls, the balcony balustrades, and the existing internal staircase from the main entrance to the original house. Next slide, please. So further photographs again illustrating some of the detailing in the main building. That's the main entrance door, third photograph from the left, and the main staircase to the left of that. Next slide, please. So this is one of the more sensitive parts of the main building, which illustrates one of the freestanding bathroom pods, which is intended to minimize internal alterations and interventions in the main building. That's the structure, top, center, freestanding structure. Next slide, please. This is the part of the site known as the teaching block, which will remain largely unaltered, but for some new doors and windows. We begin to notice then the change in land levels from single to two-story appearance of the building. That's the final slide for the main building, Chair.
Okay, colleagues, any questions on the presentation and the issues around the main building? Nope, I'm seeing no one indicate. So if colleagues are happy to continue, then you may move on to section 3.
Thank you, Chair. So sports hall housing. So sports hall is going to be demolished. This is now showing the replacement housing consisting of 4 terrace blocks with a detached 2-story unit with 2 flats. That's to the right square building. Next slide, please. These are the elevations showing the simple and contemporary external appearance to these houses. Not illustrated, but worth noting is that the roofs will include solar voltaic tiles. Next slide, please. So further elevations and sections, again, begin to appreciate the relationship of the sports hall housing to the main building to the right, and then also the change in levels to the rear of the site. Next slide, please. This is one of the layout plans from one of the terraces, showing typical kind of accommodation split across 3 levels. Next slide, please. And this is the detached flat building known as Temple. Illustrates the internal accommodation and obviously elevational details. That's final slide, Chair, for section 3.
Thank you very much. Any questions, colleagues? Yes, Councillor Tyson.
Thank you, Chair. Apologies, Peter. There's something that we talked about in the previous section that I can't get out of my mind. Could you please explain the concept of a freestanding bathroom pod?
Yes. So in the original building, where you're trying to create the necessary spaces for the residential uses, it's not always possible to do that in a sensitive way. So the freestanding pod unusually kind of sits in the middle of the room, and it doesn't really connect then to the existing fabric. So it stands kind of in isolation, and again, minimizes that any interventions, just really simplifying that.
Thank you very much. Any further questions at this stage? No. Carry on, Peter.
So next slide, thank you. It's not a slide I recognise. Can we go to the next slide, please? So these are still the sports hall housing. So these must have, these are duplicates. Sorry about that. So next slide. So yes, okay. Thank you. This is the pump house and tank house. These are located to the south of the main building. Plan references are 10 and 11. So we are looking at creating 2 dwellings in these disused buildings with new cart lodges or carports. Next slide, please. So this is the pump house, elevations and floor plans. Comprises 2 modest, simple, single-story utilitarian buildings. Next slide, please. These are the proposed elevations and floor plans, which include minimal external alterations and the provision of simple glazed link between the 2 previously detached structures. Next slide, please. This is the tank house, existing elevations and floor plans. Appreciate here just a simple 2-story utilitarian building. Next slide, please. These are the proposed elevations and floor plans, which include minimal external alterations to facilitate the conversion of the building to residential use. And next slide, please. So these are the cart lodges, carports for those 2 properties. That's the end of that part of the presentation.
Okay. Any questions on the pump house and tank house, colleagues? No, I'm seeing no one indicate. Okay, can you press ahead, Peter.
Thank you. So this is the summer house plantation housing, annotated 8 and 9 on the proposed site layout plan. So summer house and Harwood House are located within the more recent plantation. That's to the north west of the main building and adjacent to the what's known as the East Drive. As part of this proposal, you'll see it's necessary to remove some low quality trees to facilitate the construction of the buildings. Next slide, please. These are the elevation and floor plans, which illustrate the 2-story properties, which are identical in layout and plan. The primary external materials comprise glazing and a form of natural slate. Next slide, please. These are the carport elevations and floor plans, which are similar in appearance to the proposed car parking facilities at the East Car Park, which we'll go on to next. That's the end of that part of the presentations.
Okay. Any additional detail required from members of the panel on this? Yes, Councillor Claydon.
Apologies if I missed this in the report or something you've already said, but is there plans for EV chargers in these carports?
Yes, is the short answer to that.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks.
I'm not seeing anyone else indicate, so you can carry on.
Thank you. So next slide, please. So here we have the East Car Park, which is annotated 43 on the proposed site layout plan. which is to be located southeast of the main building. It will include solar photovoltaic panelled roofs where they are covered, the energy centre for the main building, which is principally going to be air source heat pumps, domestic storage space for the properties, and communal bin storage. Next slide, please. These are the elevation plans, and again, illustrating the relationship between the walled boundary to the car park and the existing land levels. The higher ground levels to the south, the main building, will mean that the car park is visually contained and inobtrusive within the immediate and wider landscapes. That's the end of the East Car Park presentation, Chair.
Thank you. Do colleagues have any questions specifically on the East Car Park? Nope. I'm aware that. Oh yes. Sorry, didn't spot you there, Nigel. Yes,
Sorry.
go ahead.
Communal bin storage. Does that mean everybody's sort of domestic bin? I'm just thinking it seems an awful long way from, say, the house. Is that we probably want to answer the question? Is that people's regular bins, or is that communal, as in a collective bin?
We don't have specific details on what will be stored, what type of bins, whether they're individual, communal.
Okay.
At this stage, yeah.
Because what was worrying me, as I said, it's a long way from some of those places. If that's where your bin is, it's a hell of a hike, and I would hope someone doesn't have any mobility issues. I'm just imagining people traipsing quite some distance to put the stuff in their grey bin or whatever. But maybe it doesn't mean that sort of bin.
Yeah, I'm guessing obviously the properties will have bins within their kitchen areas in the normal way, and then they're emptied and taken at various points when they're full to the communal bin storage area. There might be a question that you can ask the developer and his team when that moment comes.
Thank you.
Welcome.
Thank you. I think that's very well spotted. That's a section that we usually see in the reports and doesn't appear to be in this one. So, Councillor Mason, if you want to hang on to that for the applicant, and I'm sure that the applicant will have a response prepared ready for that. Councillor Peace.
I think this might be a similar question that heads to the applicant in the end, but as you've got the communal car parks, is there any vehicular access to the individual properties? So I'm thinking if people have their shopping delivered, for example, or emergency access vehicles, can vehicles get close to the properties?
Yes, it's the short answer to that question. Yes.
Okay, colleagues, any further questions on the East Car Park? Nope. Great. I'm going to keep the final two sections separate just because there might be questions about the community sports facilities and some of the things that flow on from that. But equally, colleagues may have questions about the parks and grounds as well. So let's press on with the current plan to separate them out. Peter, do you want to go to parks and gardens for me?
Thank you. Yeah. So next slide, please. And next, that's it. Yeah. Okay. Go back to the original proposed site layout plan. So here, parks and gardens, the proposed site plan, which this shows the various historic garden areas located to the north and the west of the main building, which is one. The existing and retained landscaping to the wider grounds, and the new planting woodland 39 and the wildflower meadows at 40, together with the boulevard of trees immediately northeast of the main entrance. That's in front of the pump house, tank house area of the site. Next slide, please. So this is the historic garden plan, which illustrates the areas to be restored with plants and trees that would have existed in the original gardens. Of note is a community growing space, which is to be included in one of the herbaceous borders in this area of the site. Next slide, please. And this plan shows the existing swimming pool, which revert back to its original use as a pond, located west of the main building. The unsympathetic changes made when it was first used as a swimming pool being removed. This includes the concrete apron and the associated pool buildings, and original York paving will be reinstated together with other replica garden features. Next slide, please. This photograph illustrates some of the existing historic structures within the garden areas, including gates, gazebos, steps and footpaths. Again, all of which will be restored as part of the garden restoration works. That's the end of that part of the presentation, Chair.
Okay, thank you. And Councillor Claydon.
Given all of these features, including some steps on the site, does it have any implications for accessibility to the properties?
I'm guessing that there will be some areas of the site that might be somewhat restricted, but again, it might be a question, because we don't have that level of detail at this stage, that will come forward as part of the conditional matters, but maybe it would be a good question to ask the developer, I think.
And Councillor Tyson.
I was just wondering about the longer term maintenance of the landscape grounds. Is that something that the council has a role in or control over? I'm thinking particularly of the historic heritage aspects of the site on the northwest part.
Yes, so Historic England, who are a statutory consultee, had suggested or recommended that a condition is included requiring a management plan for the whole of the site. So that is a conditional matter that's set out in the original report.
Okay, and Councillor Fernandez, I saw you. No, same question. Brilliant. Okay, great. So final section then, Peter, is the sports facilities.
Thank you. So here we have an extract of the proposed site plan, which illustrates the community tennis facilities at 29, the cricket field at 22, the pavilion at 38, and the car parking for these facilities, which are located immediately west of the tennis courts. Developers agreed that these facilities will be leased to the parish council, that's the tennis courts, and Preston Cricket Club for a 75-year period on peppercorn rents. These matters would be secured through the Section 106, and maintenance of these facilities would fall to the two respective organisations. And as already confirmed, the wider grounds would be managed and maintained by management company, with details to be secured by condition. Next slide, please. As part of the cricket facilities, the developers also agreed to provide financial contribution to the cricket club towards the laying of the cricket field and the new pavilion building. The pavilion building has been designed to meet minimum standards of the governing cricket board, single story in height, simple in appearance with a timber cladded appearance. Next slide, please. So that's the final slide. That's the main proposed site layout plan, which might be helpful to have up if members. Thanks, Chair.
Yeah, that's great. Thank you. Do colleagues have questions about the community sports facilities? Yes, Councillor Claydon.
Do these sports facilities and the footpaths circumnavigating the site constitute the expected extent of public access to the site?
Yes, so the permissive paths, the existing permissive paths and the proposed permissive paths are to be secured for public use as part of the permission. These are matters secured through the Section 106 agreement.
Right, but I guess I'm asking the converse question, which is, will the public be kept out of the remainder of the site?
I understand, but yes, that's my understanding, but maybe clarification. The footpaths will be secured by boundary fences because there's cattle that graze in the wider grounds. So
Thank you.
Great, thank you. On the sports facilities specifically, I've got a question, Peter, that I hope you can assist with. Obviously, we've talked about leasing out the tennis courts, etc. What sort of stewardship model is going to be in place with these, and how stable and secure is that likely to be? Obviously, I'm mindful that we have local government reorganisation coming down the path, so if they are going to be items managed by the council, we need to make sure that the contracts in place are going to be able to be securely ported over. If it's a management company, again, it'd be good and beneficial, I think, for members just to be aware of that.
Yeah, so the idea is that the Section 106 will secure leases for both the cricket club and the parish council to take on the responsibility of those two facilities. So the leases, as said previously, will be a 75-year period, and the maintenance of those facilities would fall to those two respective organisations. So the council would not be directly involved in the management of those facilities in the long term.
Okay, and it's not going to be the council that has ownership or is involved in the lease arrangement at all. That remains with the site and management company.
That's correct, yes.
Yeah, perfect. Thank you very much. Do you colleagues have any further questions on the sports facilities at all? I have another one that's linked to the usage. Obviously, we haven't discussed car parking in detail yet on the site, but there are 19 car parking spaces specifically linked to the access to the sports facilities. Are we confident that that is going to be sufficient and that the site is going to be able to sustain, for example, if there are more visitors than 19 to the sports facilities, on street parking if needed?
Thank you, Chair. It's a good question. So as part of the negotiations that we've had with the developer and Sport England, this matter was raised. We've worked with Sport England and they have confirmed that they're happy that those 19 spaces are sufficient for the general kind of cricket use on the site. It's anticipated that the tennis use would be local, so people would probably walk or cycle perhaps to the facility. There is also potential within the site adjacent to the East Drive, so that's the secondary access sort of immediately north of the sports facilities, excuse me, to provide some overflow car parking on the grass verges either side of the access.
Okay. Any further questions from colleagues on the slide deck before I move us on? Nope. Okay. Do you have any sort of further parts that you want to draw out and then elaborate on from the main report?
Not at this stage, Chair, but happy to come back as necessary.
Okay. Are there any additional questions that members have that haven't already been asked or haven't been prompted by the slides? Yes, Councillor Peace.
It's just one about the S106 agreement with the funds requested from the NHS. It says TBA on page 59. I think I read a document as part of the documents that said that the NHS were working on 1.7 occupants per dwelling. That seems quite a low number considering the number and size of the dwellings. I just wondered if that sounded like a reasonable estimate from your experience.
It's below what they would normally ask for, is what I understand. But as is required by the SIL regulations, we have to look at the site and the proposal, what's reasonable, and also understand where the provision would be made and then what is required to meet the extra need, how that is done. So essentially the initial figure that we received from the ICB, NHS ICB, related to new build costs, where in fact they indicated also in their response that it would be a refurbishment or extension to existing property. So we expect maybe the costs will be slightly lower than they had initially indicated, which is why there's still some discussions occurring on the final kind of amount of money.
All right, Councillor Claydon.
That wasn't me. Thank you, Chair. I was just wondering about the calculations around affordable housing. I understand that essentially the correct me if I'm wrong, but it seems that the vacant building considerations effectively negate all requirement for affordable housing as calculated in this. Is that correct? It seems slightly surprising to me that ends up being abnegated entirely, so that it drops down to zero and there's no requirement.
I'll let Sean answer that question. Thank you.
The answer to that is yes, but I'll expand. There is a provision in the NPPF, the National Planning Policy Framework, paragraph 65, as part and parcel of the encouragement for the reuse of vacant buildings and the development of previously developed land. Paragraph 65 basically discounts existing floor space against the requirement for affordable housing. And so you only need to provide, under paragraph 65, you only need to provide affordable housing for any net increase in floor space compared to what the floor space of the vacant building is. In this instance, there's no net increase in floor space compared to the floor space of the existing vacant building. And therefore, under that provision of the NPPF, no affordable housing is required. Some councils, in London in particular, I believe, do have special planning documents that, for their own particular reasons, for example, we don't have any green spaces to build houses on, and a lot of the delivery is through the redevelopment of vacant or reuse of vacant buildings. They have a provision to set aside that provision. At North Arts, we don't, and therefore the provisions at paragraph 65 are we should comply with. There's no basis for us not doing so. We have nothing in our local plan or any special document that says we shall not comply with that requirement in the NPPF, and therefore the discount does apply in North Arts. And in this instance, because there's no net increase in floor space, no affordable housing is proposed, and that is reasonable based upon the provision of paragraph 65 of the NPPF. It's a very particular circumstance that relates to the reuse of vacant buildings. It doesn't apply to greenfield sites. You can't apply this to greenfield sites. It's a particular circumstance in this particular case, or any other case where you'll be reusing vacant buildings.
You coming back on that?
May. Right. I understand that some of the buildings are being reused, but not all are, right? So some are being demolished and new ones are being built in their place. So although the net floor space that's left over is the same, it's not purely a question of reusing existing buildings. It's a question of reusing some existing fabric, tearing some other fabric down and building new in its place. And we've also had planning applications that have been discussed at this committee where buildings are being used without any external modifications at all, and there is still a requirement in those cases. So I'm just struggling to understand how this fits in these different circumstances. I wonder if you could clarify slightly further.
The policy also, and we're talking about vacant buildings, not buildings that are currently in use. It also applies to redevelopment of existing vacant buildings. So in this instance, a sports hall and other buildings are proposed to be demolished and replaced by new buildings. And that would not involve a net increase in floor space. It would replace existing floor space, vacant floor space, with new floor space, but there's no net increase.
I understand where the question's coming from. I see the confusion. I've got the text of paragraph 65 in front of me, and in drafting terms, it is clear and unambiguous. I think that there may be questions you wish to direct to a different place around that, and there has recently been a consultation on the NPPF. Okay, great. Councillor Fernandez.
I was just wondering about the gates that are mentioned. Obviously, there are old original gates that are going to be restored. What is access to the site going to be like when it's completed? Is it a gated development? Will it be electronic gates? Will only residents be able to pass through? I just wondered how that was going to work.
Yes, so there are a number of permissive paths across the site. So we talked about from the Dow House in the north, there's a new permissive path, and there's a new gate that will exit through the existing boundary wall adjacent to the bus stop on Hitcham Road. That path will also run down to the existing gate, which exits adjacent the green, a bit further south, which was used by the school, and that footpath would be used by residents as well from the site. And then at the main gate, there would be some unrestricted access yet to be determined. But yeah, the idea, obviously, they're permissive paths, so people should be free to move to and from the community facilities to the village, is the idea.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Thank you. First of all, thank you to Councillor Claydon for touching on the subject that was dear to my heart. I have a question just about, which is to the officers. Whilst a developer in this particular instance isn't required to include affordable housing, am I right in assuming there's no reason why they shouldn't? It just strikes me that looking at this development, this is very much seems to be to take this this space, this building, this area that has necessarily been a very closed private space because it's been a school, and turning it into presumably absorbing it into the local community and into the life of the village. And it would just seem to me that given the issues particularly facing young people in affordable housing, this would be a wonderful opportunity to do something along that lines. I just wanted to ensure there was no reason why they couldn't.
It is obviously something we've thought on. Basically, there was no requirement for them to provide affordable housing, but I understand what you're saying. There are other practical considerations that would move us away from requiring, if we could require, which we can't, the provision of affordable housing on the site. There's two considerations really. First of all, the Grade 2 listed building is obviously of particular heritage sensitivity, and it's unlikely that a registered provider, affordable housing provider, would wish to take on the risks and liability of providing affordable housing within a Grade 2 star listed building. For example, if the tenants were to alter anything within that flat, for example, both the tenant and the affordable housing provider would be criminally liable for any alterations. And there's also maintenance issues with regards to that. The other issue would be, well, what about the new build and providing affordable housing in the new build? My understanding is that the new build will actually be subsidising the works to the listed building, and if it was affordable, it would not be able to provide that level of subsidy. So there are practical reasons why affordable housing might not work, but the basic reason for it is that policy dictates that we cannot require that affordable housing in any event.
Just to come back on that, completely understand that. I suppose that's very much through the prism of affordable housing for social rent being provided by a provider in that sense. I'm aware that a lot of London boroughs are involved in, or a lot of, in fact, companies in London provide more affordable housing for young people and for first-time buyers in particular. So that's not those issues of a provider being responsible for the rent. It does not apply. There's nothing to stop a developer doing the same thing and saying we will provide X number of, we'll provide 5 housing which will be available for local first-time buyers under the age of 30 or whatever. When you make up any rules you like, can't you? Because thing. So I'm just saying that is not. Unless someone tells me differently, I see no reason why that couldn't be done.
think Sean's provided as much guidance and sort of policy position as possible on that, Councillor Mason. And I suspect we may return to this point during the debate if needed. Right, colleagues, any further questions for officers on the application? Right, I'm seeing no one indicating. So in that case, I will move us onwards to our first public speaker, which is Parish Councillor Margaret Trinder. Margaret, you're going to have a whole 5 minutes to speak. Thank you.
Good evening, Madam Chairman and councillors. I'm Chairman of Preston Parish Council and I'm here this evening to lend the support of the Parish Council to this planning application for Temple Dinsley. Parish Council is pleased to note that the conversion of the main house will retain its original style and historic fabric, so that this heritage asset has a new and viable use to support its long-term conservation. The Parish Council believes that the plans for all the buildings on the site have been sensitively drawn so that any damage to heritage assets is limited, and that new build dwellings are appropriate in design and scale for their specific environment within the Grade 2 style listed park and gardens. The Parish Council had some concerns about the conversion of the tank house and the pump house in an area of the park which is enjoyed by many Preston residents on a daily basis. However, following further consideration, it accepts that it will be better for them to be converted to dwellings so that they are maintained long-term as viable heritage assets rather than being left to deteriorate. It is intended that the design of these dwellings will enhance the setting and have limited adverse impact on their wider surroundings. The Parish Council is pleased to note that provision will be made to protect wildlife, particularly barn owls, in this part of the site, which will address concerns of local residents. In addition, appropriate conditions will protect archaeological and ecological issues. The Parish Council therefore supports the plans for the conversion of the tank house and the pump house. The Parish Council would like to record its appreciation to the developer for keeping it informed throughout both the pre-application and application process so that the community could, in turn, be updated. Temple Dinsley is an important part of the parish and residents are pleased that it is going to be developed to ensure its long-term viability and conservation. As chairman, I have been grateful to the planning officer for his support and for his work in liaising between the Parish Council, the developer and Hertfordshire Highways to ensure that the Parish Council's views have been understood. The Parish Council supports the maintenance, improvement and retention of green infrastructure in the village and would prefer not to have any new footways. Should additional footways be essential for health and safety reasons, the Parish Council would like highways to give serious consideration to use environmental friendly materials, which will be more appropriate in this rural community than tarmac. The Parish Council is grateful that the permissive paths on site, both existing and proposed, are going to be secured in perpetuity by the Section 106 legal agreement. These paths will enable the residents of Temple Dinsley and the Dower House to access the village safely, and at the same time will allow the village community to safely access the sporting facilities on the site. The Parish Council appreciates the offer of a 75-year lease on the 2 tennis courts for community use, which will ensure that they cannot be withdrawn by a future residents group. The Parish Council will liaise with the developer on the wording of the lease so that the courts can be used for other appropriate sports, ensuring that they are used for as much of the year as possible. The Parish Council is grateful that community sporting facilities have been included in this planning application and will do its best to ensure that they are well used and valued. Parish Council hopes too that these facilities will help the new residents of Temple Dinsley to integrate into the wider Preston community. The Parish Council hopes that consent will be granted for this application this evening so that work can start on site as soon as possible. Andrew Ryans, co-chair of Preston Cricket Club, is also here in support of the application, primarily to answer any questions on the proposed development of a cricket ground and supportive pavilion on the estate, secured by a 75-year lease, with substantial part funding of both the conversion of the former school athletics ground for cricket use and the construction of a timber frame pavilion, in both cases meeting the design standards set out by the England and Wales Cricket Board and overseen in this application by Sport England. Thank you for listening.
Thank you very much, Margaret, and very well timed. Okay, colleagues, so if you could, committee members, direct questions to Margaret. However, if there are technical matters that are asked in respect of cricket, I will make a decision and exercise chair's discretion and allow for those to be answered by the appropriate person. So, any questions? There we go. Thank you, Councillor Tyson.
Thank you, Margaret. I wanted to go back to this question about the pavements and the footpaths, because I find it wholly understandable that you're reluctant to accept a scheme that might sort of result in some sort of urbanisation of the village as it is at the moment. And I know that your neighbourhood plan sets out your support for the green verges in Preston. So the question that I had, it was the amount of vehicular traffic that this site would generate, according to Highways themselves, is going to be considerably less than what existed when the school was in use. So from a health aspect, maybe they're trying to modernise things a bit, but at the same time, they are conceding that this proposal will generate less traffic than existed when the school was in use. So my question to you is, do you, I don't know how to put this politely, are there people in Preston who remember the school as it was when it was in use, and the kind of levels of traffic that were generated as a result of that compared with what is now forecast?
Yes, a lot of people do remember it. And of course, when the school was in use, there was a peak. There was the morning peak when staff and pupils were driven to school, and the afternoon peak when they're all collected and taken home again. And some came by coach, and there was quite sometimes issues with quite a large coach on our narrow lanes. And now we accept that when the site is developed for residential, there'll be traffic, less traffic, but it won't all be at the same time. It'll be presumably staggered throughout the day.
Okay. Thank you, Councillor Peace.
As we've got an expert on the cricket side of things here, I read in the report that there's an emerging women's team in Preston, and I just wondered when you would foresee there being a women's team being able to use one of the two pitches available in the village.
So of the two pitches, the existing one and the proposed one, the women's section is already using the first of the pitches, and we envisage that the burden of junior cricket through, and I say burden only because of the intensive use of the existing grounds. We run teams at under 9, under 10, under 11, 12, 13, 14, as well as the women's section and the senior men's team, some of which have mixed teams on occasion. So the new ground is designed to facilitate concurrent fixtures on the two grounds where that's necessary, but also to promote the spreading of that use of the existing recreation ground onto the new ground for some of the junior cricket, all of which is integrated between girls and boys. And in that way, I suppose, by sharing the load across the two grounds for midweek, that means that there's more community use of the main recreation ground for other community use and potentially other sports.
Okay, excellent. I think that was a very helpful question and a very helpful answer. Thank you, colleagues. Councillor Debenham.
Thank you. Presumably, if you want two games to be played at the same time, the second ground will be for your third and fourth 11 or something similar. So where do they play the home games currently?
Currently at Whitwell, couple of villages away, which is a very limited cricket facility, which has poor security of tenure from the cricket club's point of view. We're just on a rolling 1-year agreement. So the idea is to secure a more permanent base, which we can run ourselves and maintain ourselves.
And is it likely to be a grass pitch?
Yeah, so eight grass wickets is the proposal that stands.
Excellent.
Excellent. Thank you very much. Any further questions? Yes, Councillor Mason.
Well, given the invitation to ask an expert question on the cricket, I was desperately trying to think of a question on the Duckworth-Lewis method. But what I will settle for doing, if I may, Chair, is thanking both both members of the public for the contributions, which have been really, really helpful. Thank you very much. Very well laid out. Thank you.
That wasn't a question, so you don't need to answer. But no, I think we concur. I think that was an excellent presentation. Thank you, Margaret. And I think it was really helpful given the amount of information in this application around sports provision facility to have a bit more insight and understanding of what the needs in the local area are. And you helped bring that to life. So thank you very much for your contributions. Right, I have padded sufficiently, and I am also mindful of the time that we're on as well, colleagues. I see no further questions, so I am going to move us onwards to the applicant's agent, which is John Buck, who I believe, John, you're speaking for the full 5 minutes on behalf of yourself, Tom, and Russell. Yes. All right.
Chair.
Excellent. So 5 minutes starts now.
Am I live? Yes. Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Peter, Margaret, Andrew. Hello, everybody. My name is John Buck, one of the architects for Temple Dinsley. The applicant design and planning team, 30 consultancies, over 300 documents, Historic England, the Lutchins Trust, Preston Parish Council and North Herts Planning and Conservation team have worked closely together for over 2 years to address and balance the intersecting demands of this heritage site. We are all passionate about these proposals and believe the project will protect and sustain this wonderful old place for generations. Listed Grade 2 star with 69 acres of historic parkland, formal gardens and the main building, a big brick house over 300 years old, Temple Dinsley's heritage assets need to be saved urgently. Their value is immense, their fabric, arrangement, the stories they tell of lives and evolving practices of change. To keep a good story going, these heritage assets must be made viable, relevant to current lives for the next generation and on into the future. Over 900 years, Temple Dinsley has been a Knights Templar monastic complex in the 12th century, the Sadleir House in the 17th century, the Ithel House in the 18th century, and the Fenwick House in the early 20th century, much enlarged by renowned architect Edwin Lutchins, then Princess Helena College until 2021. Now, Temple Dinsley is proposed to be a mixture of apartments and houses for the 21st century. On arrival through the main gates on School Lane, there's a country house in the near distance, a sweeping drive through parkland into the open forecourt to the grand central front door of a single symmetrical house. This won't change. Our proposals repair this marvellous building, and with minimal alteration to the historic fabric, 35 single-level apartments are made, each becoming an individual and special part of the historic whole. On the ground floor of Lutchins' high significance west wing, the garden room, drawing room, smoking room and boudoir are kept together to form one generous 2-bedroom apartment. The original panelling, painted and unpainted, is conserved. Lath and plaster ceilings are repaired with acoustic and fire separation installed from above, while services go carefully under the hardwood floors. Freestanding cabinets enclose the new bathrooms and are placed, like large pieces of furniture, to allow the proportion and full extent of the original rooms to be seen. Surrounding the house, the Lutchins Jekyll Formal Gardens, a series of external rooms interlinked by gateways, steps and pergolas, are conserved and shared by all. Essential for a school, but detrimental to the heritage setting, the sports hall and science block are removed. In their place, a group of 5 new buildings provide 22 homes. Drawing on the characteristics and materials of 19th century model farms, these buildings sit low at the service end of the main building, giving much improved views to and from the house and gardens. 2 more houses, distant from the listed buildings, are sited in found clearings in the Summerhouse plantation. Simple, transparent, and animated by the changing nature of the surrounding young woodland. With no overall gain in floor area, all these new homes achieve best space, energy and access standards, and importantly, help balance the substantial costs in conserving the estate-wide heritage assets. Cars, bicycles, stores, bins and air source heat pumps are kept well away from the listed buildings. The new parking area is a brick-walled garden embedded in the landscape, out of sight of the South Drive. Transparent PV panels offset 25% energy for existing buildings, 100% for new. The proposals will generate less than half the vehicle traffic of the former school. In the parkland, Lutyen's listed pump house and tank house were built to provide water for the estate. This pair of attractive but dilapidated buildings, one in brick and one in wood, will be saved to live again as discrete homes. Parkland has its 18th century avenue and wooded perimeters reinstated, and with new planting, wildflower meadows and cattle grazing well exceeds the net gain required for biodiversity. Available to the local community and new residents alike, there's 2 tennis courts, a new ground and pavilion for Preston Cricket Club, and new public permissive paths taking us back to the main gates and the village of Preston. We respectfully request that the committee resolve to grant planning permission and listed building consent for this carefully designed project. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Another very well-timed contribution. That's very helpful. Colleagues, I'm aware that we were taken on a narrative journey without the benefit of imagery. So if at any point you would like us to pull back up certain slides just to illustrate and support and refresh your memory of what the site looked like, please let us know and we will facilitate that. However, I am going to go first to Councillor Mason now to ask his question about bins to the applicant.
I was going to say, I refer the honourable gentleman to the question I asked earlier, which if you can remember was the fact that the communal bins seem a long way from, certainly from the house, the main house. And is that everybody's regular bins? Because that's pretty much hot. That's a big hike in a dressing gown and slippers to chuck something in the wheelie bin.
Yes. Well, it's an excellent question. And you can imagine we've spent months, if not a year, working out how to keep paraphernalia away from the listed assets, but to still make all these key services accessible and available to the residents that will be in the main building. So the central bin store is about collection from big rubbish trucks coming in and going out the East Drive. It's envisaged that the management company will have a first tier, if you like, of waste collection, whereby down the stairs and out near the buildings, rubbish is left at certain points agreed in the week, and these will be collected by a premises manager and taken to the central bin store. So it's not a thing. It's not everyone is meant to do this schlep whenever they need to put their bins out. I mean, having said that, with respect to the apartments in the main building, it is in the car park. So if you're driving to and from, you might habitually put your rubbish out in that way. But the main idea is not to have bins all over the shop.
Okay, thank you. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. I was pleased to hear you talking about wanting the development to be relevant to current lives and the mixture of accommodation. In my mind, the kind of dwellings seem to fall into 2 sections. 35 dwellings in the main building, plus 2 nearby, and 2 in the plantation, which seem to be premium units. And then the 5 new buildings with 22 homes. I just wondering whether at any point you considered actually having affordable housing in the new buildings, because my maths works out that actually would be 34% affordable housing, which would be approximating to what we would usually expect from an application. I do appreciate all about what Sean has said about the MPPF, etc. But I just wondered if you actually considered it.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm going to play I'm just an architect card, but our brief was with respect to planning policy and no net gain in area. But we did, as we designed or found the apartments in the main listed assets and across the site, we were conscious about describing a good dwelling mix. So it wasn't about just producing a few premium properties. So 2/3 of all the apartments and houses provided are a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom apartments, which is when we consult the standards, is the sort of what's required for general accessibility and use in the borough. I don't want to play fast and loose with affordable terms, because the idea is if they're smaller, they are more affordable, but they're not affordable housing. But that was our consideration as conservation architects as we look through the main building, was to find as many units of a useful size as we could.
And of course, John is only the architect indeed, but both Tom and Russell are registered to speak, and I'm sure either one of you will be able to advise. You're going to go for it, Tom.
Yes, thank you, Chair. As I'm sure members are fully aware, there's sort of 2 elements I'd like to just highlight quickly on the affordable housing element. As I say, I'm sure councillors are aware, applications have to be determined in accordance with the development plan, and obviously the policy of the NPPF is vacant building credit. So affordable housing isn't required in this case. In a sort of more, should we say, real world pragmatic sense, the viability of this site, as I'm sure you can appreciate, this is a very, very large building, which has been in use for a school for 80 or 90 years, with 80 or 90 years worth of interventions and additions which were maybe suitable for a school but not for a listed building. The point I'm making is that the investment required to convert this building is very, very significant. Any affordable housing on this site could potentially render the whole project unviable. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Okay. Councillor Dennis preempted me because I was going to deliberately focus this question at Tom or Russell. And it is on the affordable housing thing. I completely understand we can't impose any conditions around affordable housing. We're advised on this one. I'm also fully aware that villages, by their very nature, offer very limited opportunities for resident young people as they grow up to have a home in the area. So the temptation is beyond me to not have a go at trying to get something for local young people in a development of this size, to allow them to get some kind of foothold in the housing market. And I do take on board. I mean, this is it's a huge scheme, and I'm sure it's very expensive, and very in its way impressive. But I don't believe that having a small number of the smaller properties, to use some of the schemes that have been used in London and elsewhere, where local first-time buyers can purchase for 80% of market value or whatever, is going to kill the thing. What it would do is it would gel this new development into the existing village and make it part of the community, rather than just some expensive properties bolted onto the edge, albeit with a nice cricket club and tennis courts. So, obviously I'm advised we can't impose it, but I am asking nicely.
I don't think you need to answer that, because I think that was a polite request to maybe consider things. I think there's been a note made, and I think Tom knows policies of this council and the way we approach things as well. But okay, Councillor Claydon.
Every time I feel victimised, Chair. I'm going to just leave my microphone where it is now.
So yeah, just again returning to a point I made earlier. Thank you for your presentation. Just wondering about accessibility of the site. With, for example, for wheelchair users, recognizing that this is a historic site and that it may have some limitations, but I just wonder if you can comment a little on that. Thank you.
Yes, thank you for that question. It's been our job for the last 25 years to work out how to make listed buildings as accessible as we can, churches not least. We've found some spaces, as Peter touched upon in his presentation, to hollow out areas in the main building for lifts that, as we go through the building, manages to make some of the apartments accessible. The new houses are accessible with respect to M42, the sports hall housing. The new houses in the Summer House Plantation are M43, so they're wheelchair accessible. And all the new gardens and landscaping around the sports hall housing is fully accessible. The gardens, the formal gardens, which are being conserved, which we talk about as a series of interlinked compartments with steps and gateways and pergolas. The Lutyens Jekyll initially intended processional route is not accessible, but you can go in other routes and find your ways to different parts of these gardens. So it pretty much is. But what we haven't done in those formal gardens, and they are grade 2 stars, so we probably wouldn't be allowed to, is introduce a series of ramps and this, that, and the other. But we are, I'm going to say, architects' accessibility audit allowed us to say, yes, you can pretty much reach all areas of this site in that way. In the main building, not all areas of those apartments, but with its new houses, yeah, that's something we're absolutely committed to.
Thank you. Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you, Chair. Sorry, can I just ask regarding the accessibility numbers? Did you give us the numbers or not? Have you got those to hand?
Sorry, which numbers?
The accessibility numbers.
How many of the
properties?
Well, all the new, so there's 22 new homes in place of the sports hall and science block. They'll be all M42 accessible in their gardens. So they have, they're built and designed so that they have places for a lift to be installed. So a lifetime housing type affair. The 2 new houses in the Summer House Plantation are only 2-story, but they're large in that area. So they've got lifts in. So they're fully accessible by a wheelchair if needed. With respect to the main building, you can imagine none of it's accessible. So we've managed to introduce a small ramp around the stable block to get us in and get us to a lift refuge which takes us up. We do our best, but of course there's loads of little steps here and there that don't pass full accessibility muster, but go much further than the main building does already. Is that helpful? Good.
That's very helpful. And I think that adds just a little bit added detail to the information that was provided in the reports as well. So that was very useful. Thank you, John. Right, colleagues, any further questions for the applicant? No. Okay, excellent. So I will take us then back to Peter to respond to any issues raised. In trailing this, I will sort of just reference back to the point that Margaret raised about the materials used for the footpaths, and if you've got any information on that, that might be helpful. Otherwise, that's something maybe to consider further with highways.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. So the new footpaths, which we talked about, the new public footpaths, sorry, these are within the conservation area. We've spoken to the Highways Authority about this. These footpaths will be delivered as part of a Section 278 agreement with the Highways Authority. So the developer would reach an agreement with the Highways Authority and deliver those footpaths. There is definitely scope to discuss the type of surfaces there so that they're appropriate. And I don't see there's an issue in delivering that at all. It's my opinion.
Excellent. And were there any other points that either yourself or Sean wanted to come back on before we move towards a proposal and debate?
I don't have any. Sean?
No, satisfied. Okay. All right then, colleagues. I am mindful of time. I do not like interrupting business for a break in the middle of an item. So unless anybody screams at me, I'm going to continue and I'm going to, yes, no, good. We're continuing. Thank you very much. So I am going to note that the officer's recommendation is to grant permission. Could I please have a motion from a member of the committee? Yes, Councillor Prescott.
Sorry, I propose to accept the officer's recommendation and reserve my right.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, may I have a seconder, please? Yes, I see Councillor Mason.
Happy to second and reserve my right to speak.
There we go. We are now into debate. So, members of the Planning Committee, would you like to debate this application? Councillor Prescott.
Can I just say, I mean, I've seen loads of these kind of things over the years. This is without doubt the most comprehensive and sympathetic set of proposals I think I've ever seen. There is no doubt that this is going to be a huge benefit to the community with the provisos that there have to be compromises. I understand that, and clearly the architect and the developer understand that, and the parish council members understand that. But I think by and large, this is an excellent proposal. I'd be more than happy to support it.
Thank you very much. Any other points colleagues wish to make? Yes, Councillor McDonnell.
Thank you, Chair. I'd just like to echo Councillor Prescott's thoughts there, and it's really lovely to see how well the applicant and the parish council and the community have clearly worked on this together to create something that's going to be of a huge advantage. So I'll also be very happy to support.
Councillor Debenham.
Thanks, Chair. It's a shame about the affordable housing, but it looks a terrific scheme, and I'm very, very pleased that the sports provision has been maintained, and couldn't think of a better thing that for a local cricket club to have their third and fourth teams, which is primarily for where the youngsters get their first meeting of adult cricket, to be within earshot of their main ground, and because these people don't have cars, I think it's brilliant.
Thank you. Councillor Debenham also plays and coaches cricket, I believe, as well, although not in this area, so there is no interest to declare. Councillor Mason was on and off, and he's on.
Did that move my hand if I did? You know, I echo what's been said. It's an extraordinary amount of work has been done on this, and by the applicants, and clearly by North Herts Council officers as well, and others, and it shows. What I do think, and I have to say, I wouldn't say it's unique since I've been on planning, but it's very rare, is to see an application that appears to be working between the applicant and the local residents and the parish council, and that's there seems to be some synergy and some sympathy between it, and it feels like a local community who perhaps feel it's being done with them rather than to them. And perhaps this is something other applicants could learn from. But I haven't given up hope on my affordable housing pilot. Unlike Councillor Debenham, who clearly sold the jerseys on that one, I'm still holding out hope on that. There's always hope.
Thank you, Councillor Claydon.
Thank you. I'm not moving my microphone this time. Yes, I agree. I think this is a very sensitively, carefully put together proposal. I think the fact that we don't have people here speaking against it, tells you something in itself. The objections that were there, have been addressed. Clearly, the parish council is happy, and I'm not inclined to second guess them. I think it clearly benefits no one for this site and this historic building to fall into disrepair, and it's great to see it being used. I do wonder slightly about a sort of compartmentalization between the sort of public facilities and everything else. But I understand, in terms of cattle grazing and so forth, there is some need to, keep areas separated, and hopefully there will be some, amenity and clear value from, the areas that are accessible, and those new sports facilities are very welcome. Yes, many thanks to everyone who's spoken this evening, and happy to support this application. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bryant.
Thank you. Now that I have heard that the 22 homes and the 5 new buildings are lifetime homes, I'm even more inclined to think that the applicant should think again about these being for young people, for local young people, who can actually then live there all their lives. After all, you don't have lifetime houses for older people. But seriously, I think that it would be a good thing for the community. I do fear that, in fact, we're going to have 2 communities. We're going to have Temple Dinsley, and we're going to have the local village, unless there's a way of there being a mixture of residences, so that local people can actually buy homes in this, which is a very prestigious development. Thank you.
All right, thank you very much. I'm not seeing anyone else indicate. I will very much echo John and Tom in particular, what the other committee members have said. I think you've done fantastic work on this. There has been some brilliant community engagement done. I think you've listened, you've heard objections, you've worked with people, and you've come up with a scheme that is supportive and complementary to the local area. Yes, in an ideal world, would we like to see affordable housing? Would we like to see options that facilitate, people being able to buy homes that don't necessarily have capital available upfront? Absolutely. But have you mitigated and provided significant and substantial community benefit with this application? I think absolutely you have. You've done that in partnership with local community facilities. You've identified a need for expansion of existing sports facilities in the area. And I think it is exactly the sort of thing, in my opinion, and the way that I would hope that applicants and developers coming to North Herts can work. So there really is a great model, and you should be very, very proud of the work. My one sort of main criticism, other than the affordable housing side of it, which is not material, colleagues, given the NPPF on this item, is something that falls, I think, outside your control. And the one thing that I would really have liked to see would be those interconnected cycle paths. And it's quite unfortunate, in my view, that we couldn't get agreement from landowners to convert existing footpaths into bridleways, which would have facilitated those safer off-road sustainable travel links. And I think that is something to be borne in mind, and maybe work that we can take forward as a planning team, working with our communities, working with our landowners, as well as building those positive and collaborative relationships with our applicants and agents when they come to this area during the pre-app phase. So yes, thank you very much. Thank you to the parish council. Thank you for the community also for engaging, because I know sometimes development feels like it's being done to you, and it can be a bit of a hurdle to get over that and feel like you can engage. But I think everybody involved on this has done really fantastic work, and it is an exemplar. Right, I'm seeing nobody else indicate to speak. So, colleagues, we've had a proposal that the officer's recommendation to grant is accepted. It has been seconded. We have had a debate on this. May we please move to a vote?
Chair, the motion is carried.
Thank you very much, colleagues. It is 9 o'clock. The next item of business is the listed building consent for Temple Dinsley. So it's the second part to this. I'm not going to ask Peter to go through slides before providing any update report on this. However, before we launch into that main item, do you want a break, or are you content to press on? I've given you an either or, haven't I, when it should be a yes, no. Break in favour. Quick show of hands. No one's sticking their hands up. We're going to continue. Right. Item number 6, 24/01605/LBC, listed building consent for Temple Dinsley, formerly Princess Helena College, address as previous. Peter, do you have anything to add on the listed building consent?
Something small, Chair. Thank you. Yes. So there are no corrections to the report. However, an additional condition is recommended to secure the details of the new pedestrian gate opening along the existing boundary wall to the northwest boundary, connecting the Dow House permissive footpath to the north of the site to the village. And this condition is set out in the full planning report addendum, as it will also require, it requires both listed building consent and planning permission. That's the only update. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, do you have any questions on the listed building consent for Peter? I am seeing no one indicate. Very well. I shall ask firstly, Margaret, did you want to make a presentation on the listed building consent? Nope, I think everything was said in the first item. Perfect. And over to the applicant, anything you wish to say on listed buildings? No.
Thank you.
No more. Excellent. Thank you very much. I should probably have asked the committee before I moved on to check with the applicant. Did you have any questions about building consent to ask the parish council? No, you didn't. Does anyone have any questions they wish to ask the applicant about listed building consent? No. All right. I don't think that there's been anything added, Peter, so I'll come back to you procedurally, but do you have anything else you want to say?
Nothing to add, Chair. No.
Marvellous. Thank you very much. Colleagues, we have an officer's recommendation that we grant the listed building consent. However, it's open to you to propose a motion. May I have one, please? Councillor Prescott.
Yet again, I propose we accept the officer's recommendation and reserve.
Thank you. And a seconder? Councillor Claydon.
Yep, happy to second.
Okay, that moves us into debate. Any debate on the listed buildings consent? I am seeing no one wishing to debate. I see Councillor Mason's fingers. Yes.
I was going to say, do we need to clarify that we're recommending acceptance with the addition of Peter's condition he spoke of?
Yes. So just to clarify, colleagues, it's with the verbal update added in. Yep. Committee members happy with that? Very good. I'm seeing nobody wishing to debate or add any further points. So may we please have a vote?
Yeah, that motion is carried.
Thank you. Which then, colleagues, brings us on to our final item of business, which is the planning appeals report that I will hand over to Sean to walk us through and highlight any points. You are welcome, of course, to stay for the remainder of the meeting. However, if you would like to leave, members of the public and applicants and representatives for Temple Dinsley, more than happy for you to do so quietly. Thank you. Councillor Prescott.
Now that members of the applicants, everybody else gone, I really would like to reiterate what's been said by practically everybody. It was a delight to see everybody working together on this one. You really can tell the difference.
Thank you. And I think, as we said, any applicant, any agent doing business in this area could probably take note of what was presented this evening and the engagement that's been done on this. However, I think we've spoken enough about Temple Dinsley now, haven't we, colleagues? Shall we go back to agenda item number 7, which is Sean's fantastic report on our planning appeals. And this is going to be an item for the committee to note. So, Sean, I'll pass over to you.
Thank you, Chair. Part of this report for information, we've had 6 appeals decided, 4 dismissed, and 2 allowed. And also we've got an additional Secretary of State's decision on a purchase notice. Now, if you want to ask any questions about what a purchase notice is, I'm happy to answer any questions you might have. They're very rare beasts. In my 36 years in planning, I've come across 2, and that's here in the last year. So they are quite rare. And then we've had 3 appeals lodged. We've also had a cost decision against us, which is also very rare here. And that related to something that is also rare, a permission in principle application, which is a 2-stage process. First of all, you apply for permission in principle, and then the second stage, you submit technical details. The inspector in that instance allowed the appeal and awarded costs because he felt that we'd perhaps merged somewhat the permission in principle aspects to the technical details, and we were considering things that he indicated we should not have considered at the permission in principle stage. I don't necessarily, basically the applicant misdirected us slightly, to be fair to us, insofar as the applicant didn't say we're applying for 4 dwellings. The applicant was more detailed in terms of what they were applying for. So there was a slight misdirection of the case officer there. But at the end of the day, it was a learning process for ourselves, and we are very much limited as to what we can consider at the permission in principle stage, and we are limited to location, land use, and the amount of dwellings. Notwithstanding that in that instance the applicant submitted an illustrative layout and proposed certain types of dwelling, which he should not have done, we are very much limited at that stage. So that's an indication as to the information behind those 2 decisions. But if members have any questions about any other matters or the decision on the purchase notice, I'm happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. I'm going to get in there before Councillor Claydon's squeaky microphone because there's an education opportunity here. Sean, what's a purchase notice?
Right. When we grant planning permission, or refuse planning permission actually, or refuse listed building consent, and in this instance it involved a listed building consent, the recipient of the refusal is entitled to make an application to us to purchase that property on the basis that, as a result of our decision, that building or property is no longer able to be used for reasonable beneficial use. In this instance, we dealt with an application for listed building consent for 16 replacement plastic windows to a listed cottage. With that application, there were no details at all of what the windows would look like. And so we refused listed building consent. 2 reasons, really. We don't normally grant listed building consent for plastic windows to listed cottages. And secondly, there was no details to show what those windows would look like. And in that instance, the applicant is below is close to Luton Airport and below the aircraft that arrive and take off from Luton Airport. And in that instance, there was a subsidy available for windows to his listed cottage, but the provider of those subsidised windows only delivers plastic windows, nothing else. So that is something that I'm sure the Luton Airport may well be looking at, but it's something that's beyond our control. Now, when we refused listed building consent, the applicant submitted to us a purchase notice saying, you purchase our listed building then, because we can't continue to use our listed building because of the noise from Luton Airport. We considered that and decided not to purchase the listed cottage and rebutted that application. The applicant has got the right to go to the planning inspectorate when we make such a decision, and the applicant did. As a result of that, a hearing took place, and at that hearing, first of all, there's 3 matters that the inspector can consider. It's a report to the Secretary of State, but there's 3 matters. First of all, whether to instruct us to purchase the property, in other words, uphold the purchase notice, and the inspector recommended that we should not. Secondly, should list of building consent be granted for the plastic windows, and the inspector said no, you should not grant list of building consent for the plastic windows. But the third option was for the Secretary of State to be able to direct us to grant listed building consent for something else. And the Secretary of State decided to take that option, which was to direct us to grant listed building consent for timber slim framed windows with a slim double glazed profile of glazing. And we've been directed to grant listed building consent for that type of development, well, not development, but windows. That application is currently before us and is about to be determined. Unfortunately, once again, there's no details of what the windows would look like, but that matter can be controlled by condition. So a purchase notice, and they're very rare, is a notice that's served on us when we refuse either planning permission or list of building consent, asking us to purchase the property because as a result of our decision, that property cannot be used thereafter. And in this instance, the inspector felt that the use of the building is adversely affected by the noise from Luton Airport, and that provision should be made for the applicant to provide noise insulation in the form of timber framed slim profile windows to that listed building, and we were directed to grant planning permission for such works, and that's what will happen. Okay.
Thank you. Thank you, Sean. I think that's really helpful and quite an interesting example. And it's quite useful to have a relatively simple example to work through to help us get to grips and understand what a purchase notice is. And I think as well, it's something that it's worthwhile us bearing in mind, given Luton Airport expansion, and there's potential scope for a conversation between this council and Luton Rising about subsidy schemes and what happens to properties in rural England that may be listed that happen to be underneath the flight path of an airport. Councillor McDonnell.
Just very quickly, so in this instance, clearly noise was the problem. What other conditions would make the property unusable?
There was a classic case going back to the 1950s where someone applied for planning permission to undertake safety works or coastal repair works to enable his house to be protected from coastal erosion. They were refused, and in that instance, the council was directed to purchase the property because the result of their refusal of those works, the property could not be used because it was at risk of being taken over by the sea. So that's a rather extreme example, but one case that I am aware of where purchase notice has been upheld. In other words, anything where someone is applying for planning permission for that will help to keep a building in reasonable beneficial use, and without those works may not be capable of a reasonably beneficial use, would form part of have prospects for a purchase notice, but they are very rare. It is quite rare that without something that we wouldn't grant permission for or grant list of building consent for, it would not be able to be used adequately or reasonably. And as I say, I've only come across two in my career, and those two were last year submitted to this council.
There we go. Councillor Prescott.
On a significantly lighter note, my house is under the approach path to Luton Airport as well, and I'm just about to sign up a contract for a load of new double glazing. Can I give you my bank details so that you can send your
No, not allowed. No. Oh, very, very naughty. Right. So I'll bring us back sensibly, colleagues. Does anybody else have sort of any questions or queries about the appeals? Is there any update that you would like to be provided? Perhaps about a certain site in Baldock that we've not heard much about? Oh, did we have an update on that at the last meeting? I can't remember. We talk about it and it keeps me up at night. I see Councillor Tyson.
Sean, I just wondered if you got any update on the Huntswich Ashwell appeal.
There's no update on that at this stage.
Thank you. Councillor Mason.
Sean, do you have an update on a certain site in Baldock? Elizabeth.
There will be a written update at the next meeting, in the first meeting in February, but I can tell you that it has been upgraded to a public inquiry. This is east of Respring for 42 dwellings. And the public inquiry is scheduled to commence on the 29th of April, and 4 days have been allocated for that public inquiry. So we're in the process of seeking to appoint counsel to act as advocate for us. We already have consultants on board to deal with viability and planning issues. As I say, there will be a written update, a written report at the next meeting, but that's the current position.
Thank you. I have boldly assumed that all colleagues know the application to which we're referring. Yes, excellent. Any further questions? No. You've got a supplementary. You may have a supplementary.
Given the date of that hearing, 29th of April, isn't there an issue that that would be in the period that what used to be known as PERDA for the county elections, particularly complicated because the applicant in that case is the county council, and obviously we're the other side of it. So is it possible that could get postponed for that reason?
No, is the answer. The planning inspector fixed the date. There's no moving it. We sought to move the date. They were not. They would not accept our suggestions. It will take place. The reason why we suggested move date was for practical reasons, because the room was being used for election work, but we've managed to move things around somewhat to accommodate the requirements of the planning inspectorate. So PERDA or PERP, wherever we want to. PERP. Right, okay, PERP. Should not affect the process, notwithstanding that the applicant is actually Chalkdean Developments LLP, but the landowner is the county council. But PERP does not affect that process, I'm afraid. The planning inspector would not move the date of the public inquiry.
And there you go. No comment. Colleagues, any further questions? I am seeing no one indicating. Thank you very much. That brings this evening's meeting to a close. The next planning committee is scheduled for the slightly earlier time of 7 p.m. on Thursday, the 13th of February. All right. Thank you very much, colleagues. That's the end of tonight's business.